She was a successful corporate leader at the top of her game when she decided to become an entrepreneur. And she made the bold leap into entrepreneurship while settling in a new country. Today, she is not only an executive and team coach, but she advocates for women leaders in Asia to rewrite the rules, which is also the title of a book where she brings together stories and learnings from 200 women leaders across Asia. Hello and welcome to Season 10 of the Womenpreneur Asia podcast, and I'm your host, Krista Goon. My mission is to uncover the stories and strategies of Asian women entrepreneurs to inspire and guide you on your own entrepreneurial journey. This episode is brought to you by Redbox Studio. I am excited to announce that applications are now open for a live, month-long virtual program that I'm co-teaching with my friend, Rowena. We are teaming up to coach women who want to create more opportunities for themselves. Applications are open until 15 August. Visit womenpreneurasia.com for more information. Today's episode features Ritu Mehrish, an executive and team coach who is based in Singapore. As Ritu puts it, a rule rewritten is a rule redeemed, emphasizing her commitment to challenging existing norms and empowering women to craft their own paths to visibility and leadership. Our episode dives into more than just Ritu's remarkable journey from the corporate world to becoming a transformative leader and coach. Ritu is committed to helping women gain the visibility they deserve. As Ritu shares, I find a little inspiration in every leader I meet, showing her deep appreciation for the diverse experiences and insights she gathers from her journey. Ritu and I had an engaging conversation filled with actionable insights on how to enhance visibility and empower yourself in today's business world. She shares practical and unique tips on how to be both seen and heard in professional settings, guiding women through the spectrum of visibility. Let's get started. Hello, Ritu. Welcome to Womenpreneur Asia.
Thanks, Krista. How are you?
I am good. So today I'm excited because I'm talking to someone who challenges the way we think about success, leadership, and showing up. Am I right?
Yes. Oh, we are the ones who are asking everybody to rewrite the rules. So yes.
You are a coach, speaker, and of course the author of the book, Rewrite the Rules, right? A book that is helping women leaders to reshape their journey on their own terms. You have an impressive bio, but I want to begin with a word that makes even the most accomplished women pause, which is visibility. Ooh. So Ritu, let me ask you right off the bat, right? What is a moment in your own journey that you realized being good wasn't enough, that you also had to be seen?
Yeah, there have been many moments, but I will talk about probably the earliest moment in my career when I realized just doing your job or being good at your job may not be enough. I will take you back, and this is like, when you are as old as I am, you kind of, you say years that people probably won't recognize. Anyway, this was, I think it was about 1999 or 1998. It was my first job. And, I was part of a program at Gillette, which is now P&G, where every year I come from finance background. So within finance, we had to rotate every year to get exposure to all the aspects of the department. So I was finishing my tenure with financial reporting, and I was very keen to take on the next assignment in treasury, which was really high visibility function within the finance function. So basically, if you were in treasury, you get to meet the bankers, you get to interact with other organizations, other departments within the same organization. So you get to make presentations. So it was quite high visibility role, so to say, and an exposure. And I was, in my early 20s that time, and that role really excited me. Now, what happened was, just when I was finishing my 1 year with financial reporting, I assumed my next one will be treasury because I was fairly good at my work and I had got really good rating. But what happened, just a week before we were about to get our next roles, I realized one of my peer got that role in treasury that I wanted. And I was kind of a little, upset. So I went to my manager and I said, I had been working really hard and this is the role I really wanted. And I thought naturally I would get it. And, Krista, what is funny is my manager looked so surprised. He said, Ritu, did you really want that role? I'm like, yeah, of course. He said, I had no clue. I mean, it made me even more angry. And I'm like, why did you think that? I mean, I didn't say exactly why did you think that, but in some words like that, I would have said, that what made you think that? And he said that, I always thought you're somebody who liked to sit behind the desk, who's happy doing what you're doing. I didn't know you'd enjoy, going out and presenting and all those things. He said, I just thought you were very happy doing what you're doing. And, and like I said, I was in my early 20s, but that's when I realized that if you are not vocal with what you want, which is an important aspect of visibility, which people don't think about, is people will assume that you're quite happy doing what you're doing, right? Visibility is not just about shouting about yourself on top of a roof, but it's even making other people aware of what you want. So that was my very early lesson, that if you need something, you ask for it, because people are going to form an opinion. And like my manager, he was very well-intentioned, but he just assumed, because I sat quietly, I was behind my computer those days, wasn't even laptop, computer those days, and he thought I was happy doing what I was doing. So
wow.
Yeah, so here was my first lesson.
What a story. So I know you said that the lesson here is about being vocal, about asking for really what you want. And that's also intricately tied up with visibility, right? Because we assume visibility is like, oh, I have to be seen. But sometimes you also have to be heard, right? Being seen and heard is part of visibility. So after that, what happened in your next career move or your next journey?
So, I did not, unfortunately, because there was only one role for that, I did not get it that year. I was really disappointed. And my manager was very apologetic. But the year after that, I did do a rotation in Treasury. From here on, one thing I learned is two things. One, don't always think people will assume that they'll know what what you want, that they're going to assume, right? So you be vocal. And throughout my career after that, Krista, I made it a point to tell my manager what's the next role, whether it was after 1 year, 2 years, that I'm going to do, right? So that was one. Secondly, also go out and talk about your stuff, right? Go out, and if there are forums, don't shy away. Because I remember early on in my career, sometimes my manager would want to send me to these interdepartment meetings to go and represent him. And I would really be a little bit saying, what am I going to say there? Or, I don't know anybody there. And I was very reluctant initially. But I think that's the other thing I picked up from my time with in Gillette for 4 years, is that if you're given an opportunity, grab it, right? So those were my very early steps. It's only much later in my career I started learning about not only wait for opportunity, but how do you go and ask for opportunities? How do you raise your hand up for a critical project so that you can get visibility? Even now, sometimes I hear people saying, oh, but if I talk too much about my work, will it look like I'm boasting? So in that sense, people define visibility with a very narrow lens. It's not about talking. It's not about talking about yourself. Visibility goes beyond that. Visibility is about making sure you take up roles that are exciting. You take up roles that nobody probably wants to take. I'll share this interesting incident. In March, I was in a panel discussion, and the CHRO, global CHRO of Kyndryl, it's her phrase, and that's why I want to make sure I kind of, source this correctly. She used this term, seek the heat. And I loved it. Basically, she said in her career, she always put her hand up for a very challenging assignment. And that automatically did two things. One, it gives you visibility. And also it hones your own skill, because you are kind of growing because you're stretching yourself, you're doing things that you're learning also, and you're kind of putting in that extra. So I think that's a big part of visibility that often people don't talk about.
Great insights. I like seek the heat.
Yes. Isn't that a lovely phrase? I picked it up from her, and I told her, I said, I'm going to be using it, but I'll make sure I credit it to you. It's not my statement.
It is something that women fear going out there and talking about themselves. I mean, that is the part where it sounds a little bit negative, right? Like, you're always talking about yourself. Oh, you're some people like to brag, right? So, Ritu, since you have written a book about this and also you work with countless women leaders, is there any truth to this? How would you make it more appealing to someone who says that I don't like to talk about myself so much. I don't like to put myself out there so much. I'm sure you've heard that regularly.
Oh, yeah. Regularly. So I think the way I look at it, it's a spectrum, right? Everything is a spectrum. 0 being you don't talk about yourself at all, right? 10 being you talk about yourself all the time. So when people are actually at 0, they are looking at 10 saying, oh, I don't want to be that person. But you don't have to be that person. Between 0 and 10, there are 8 numbers in between, right? So you can be a 2, you can be a 3, you can be a 4. So you don't go from not talking about yourself, oh, I don't want to be bragging about myself. Those are 2 extremes. And actually, if I'm being really candid, sometimes I really challenge my participants or people who are going through the program or people whom I'm coaching. I'm saying, are you using that excuse as for not doing anything at all? Because you're not going to go from 0 to 10. You have to move to 2 or a 3. So when people say, oh, I don't want to be bragging, yeah, you won't go there because you're a 0 right now. How would you go to 10, right? So you have to think of it as a spectrum and see, okay, where you move and whatever you're comfortable with. A lot of people say, okay, I don't want to speak up. Fair enough, don't speak up. Maybe create visibility through digital footprints. Right now, we have this really powerful medium. You can pen your thoughts. You can write an article. You can, write posts. It's not only just speaking, right? There's so many different shapes and forms you can do. Krista, like your podcast, you're hosting a podcast. You're inviting guests on a podcast. This is a great visibility platform for everyone, right? And where we are talking on topics that we are passionate about. It's not like we're talking about ourselves. And that's the other point, that when people think about visibility, they only think that, oh, I am bragging about myself. No, when you talk about your work, when you talk about what you are passionate about, you also have to think, who are you impacting? Who's benefiting from what you're sharing? And the minute you change the focus from yourself to the other person or the impact you're creating on the other person, it doesn't become a brag anymore. Then it's about creating that impact.
Yeah, that's a great thing to keep in mind. I mean, the spectrum part is interesting because I think a lot of people think they're going to move from 0 to 10 immediately.
Exactly.
Which scares a lot of people, right? Which scares a lot of people. I would say people because even men get scared. Like, oh my God, from 0 to 10, that's a huge jump. But is there like any simple mindset shift? I mean, is that the shift that we need to have first before we even launch ourselves into doing it?
Yeah, I think the mindset shift is, why are you doing this, right? So who is it benefiting? So 2 things, right? One is it going to benefit me in my career? So, so then it doesn't become a nice to, it's almost a must do, right? It's almost like you have to do this. Secondly, is it going to impact somebody? Is it going to benefit somebody? So you take the focus off you and you put that somebody in the center of things. If it's going to benefit somebody, yes, then chances are you'll do it, right? And the third question really, I mean, again, is like, what are the downside of me not doing it? Because also at the same time, you hear a lot of people and a lot of women leaders also complaining, oh, like, such and such person got that promotion. I got overlooked for this. I did not, kind of get this opportunity. So if you're not going to be willing to be speaking about yourself, then you don't have to complain about these opportunities that you miss. Because that's the downside of not being visible.
I think that's a great point because I think a lot of people look at visibility and give themselves excuses of why they can't be more visible. But they forgot that there is a downside to it, right? Not being visible is one thing, is an action that something that you choose not to do. But there is a downside to it, right?
Absolutely.
Other people get promoted. Other people get the job that you want.
Exactly. So the other thing in the book, Rewrite the Rules, and that's why the topic is Rewrite the Rules, is that do what feels comfortable to you, right? If you're an introvert, I know it's very difficult for you to kind of suddenly go in front of 200 people and speak, or go into a big conference and suddenly start talking to 100 people. No. So if you're going to a big conference, and you are an introvert, you're shy, you don't want to talk too much, okay, just pick 3-4 people that you want to speak with. But then be intentional about it. Okay, I'm going into this conference. I have looked at these people who are attending. Do some research on those 3-4 people and just in your mind say, okay, I'm going to speak to only these 3-4 people. And that's it. But you've gone with intentionality. Don't just go there unprepared and then just kind of wander around, just say hello, hi, and to like 10 people. And then by the 10th person, you're so exhausted, you come back and you've not achieved anything. In fact, you felt drained. So that's the other way of looking at it, is that how can you be more intentional and how can you come prepared when you're going for conferences?
Yeah. So I think that is about being intentional, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of people go to conferences without any intentions.
Yes, I agree. And in fact, in the book, we say the first thing is if you've accepted or if you've agreed to go to a conference, do some pre-work. So identify 4 or 5 people from the people who'll be attending, identify them, do a little bit of research about them, read up a bit, what you find interesting, and then approach them, right? And very often I get asked, if you're going to approach, what do we talk about? Talk about things that you've read about them or you've seen about them, that you found out about them. Pick some common things, right? Common things are like weather, some sports, some event, not political events, but any big events that have happened, right? Talk about maybe families or maybe hobbies or anything, because, we can be very different people, but there'll always be some commonality. And the key is if you can find those commonalities, then the conversation becomes easier. And the second thing I tell introverts is, look, people love few things. One, they love it when somebody else calls them by their name or remembers their name. People love to talk about themselves, right? So you have to then ask open-ended question. Not, how's the food? People say, good or bad. Don't stop at that. Great. What was your favorite? What did you try? Did you try that dessert? Or, do you know there's a new restaurant in town? So you pick things like that, right? Make conversation easy. It doesn't have to be about your work, about you. It's just creating a little bit of genuine conversation.
One thing I like to ask, and this always gets people excited, is when was the last country you've traveled to? I think people just enjoy talking about their holidays.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yes, people love to talk about, as you said, about their holidays, about their experience. Yes. So, I kind of, I went all the way in the conference setting, but because that's where people think, when they think about visibility, they think about conferences, right? Going to conferences. But like I've said this before, the other thing, you have to find out what else is there that will make you visible, either within the organization or even outside the organization.
And for someone who is starting out versus someone who's already been in the organization for a while, are there different visibility techniques or approaches, or are they the same across the board?
Right. So let's say if somebody's joined new in an organization, their approach is going to be different because they have to get to know the little bit of the ecosystem, right? They don't know anybody. And I always tell people, if they are new in an organization, for the first 3 months, it's their honeymoon. They can reach out to anybody for a coffee catch-up because they don't know anybody, right? And when I'm coaching leaders who are transitioning into new organizations, I always say, these 3 months, you can reach out to the CEO, to the CFO, anybody. Just say, I would love to have a 15-minute conversation or a 20-minute conversation. Reach out to as many people as you can, because that will help you integrate into the system so quickly. And even to people who are shy, this one is not about you. This is, you're just asking the other person to talk. You're just asking them questions and you're just showing curiosity and you're asking them things, right? So I would say that reach out to as many people as you can, especially in the first 3 months of your new role or a new organization.
So this is for someone who's new in the organization.
Yes.
For someone who's probably been there for a number of years, would there be any other unique approaches that they could try besides the one going to the conference and making sure that you know them and they know that you're there?
So for people who've been in this organization for a while, even then I'll say that identify 2-3 people who you think can be your possible sponsors, mentors, who could be head of departments where you probably want to roll after 1 year or after 2 years, right? Like basically the leadership, reach out to those people to grab a coffee. Like I haven't yet met any leader who will say no if somebody's reached out to them. In fact, anytime I talk to senior leaders and they say they love it when people reach out to them, right? It makes them feel good about themselves. So I always joke, say that you are devoiding somebody else of that joy by not reaching out to them.
That's a good way of putting it.
Exactly.
You're taking away someone's joy just because you didn't reach out for a coffee,
Exactly. Because people love it, right? People love it when somebody comes to them, asks them for their advice, asks them for some time, asks them for some inputs. It's always good. And people are always willing to do that. People are willing to give. And Krista, that's the mindset. When people are trying to reach out, you have to think that people have the right intention and they do want to help. You have to go in with that mindset.
So it basically sounds like first you have to be, of course, curious, right? You have to be curious about the other party. And the other thing is the ability to give freely, openly.
Yes.
That
I agree.
Makes up part of the visibility approach that we're trying to use, right? If we're new in the organization. Okay, so let's switch a little bit from organization. For instance, what if that person is an entrepreneur?
Yeah, great. I think entrepreneurs, it's the same thing. I mean, okay, it's same, but it's different. It's same in the sense the same rule almost apply, but they have to reach out to people who are probably not in the organization, right? Who are in the ecosystem. And there comes, again, the downside of not being intentional about your visibility is that you will not be very successful in building an ecosystem, right? Or let's put it the other way. In order for you as an entrepreneur to build a robust ecosystem or a support system or a community, you have to be visible. You can't not be anywhere and yet be part of a community, right? And so then in order to build that ecosystem, what do they have to do? One, they have to reach out to people. They have to reach out to people not only to ask for help, but also how can they support others, right? Any connection. So I'm kind of bordering between how do you build network and visibility, because both are so intertwined. When you have an active network, you're visible. Visibility leads to a network, to a great network. So it's kind of very, what's the word?
It's very intertwined, right? Is it
exactly
intertwined?
Intertwined. Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for helping with that word. Yes, so it's intertwined, and entrepreneurs know it, because what happens is entrepreneurs don't have the benefit of big organization, right? So they rely a lot on each other, and as you rightly said, it's not about just taking when you're trying to build an ecosystem or you're trying to be part of an ecosystem. It's a lot about giving too. And sometimes giving doesn't mean necessarily in terms of money, time. It could just be being a great listener. A lot of time people get stuck, I don't have any skill, or this industry is not relevant to this person, or I have a skill set which is very different from what they need. But sometimes people just need somebody to listen to them, or somebody to give a very different perspective, right? So it's these very small things that actually go a long way in building network and in building visibility.
Okay, so now Ritu, I want to make a little switch before I get deeper into asking about visibility. I want you to talk a little bit about yourself, right? And of course, I know that you are a coach and you're an entrepreneur. And you've been an entrepreneur for a good decade?
Yes.
Right?
This year is 10 years.
Yes. So talk to me a little bit about that. How did that start? I mean, I know you, in the beginning of this interview, you talked about your job and how you didn't get the role that you wanted. But how did you transition out of that to become an entrepreneur? And that's fascinating for me.
I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2015, early 2015. So it's been 10 years. But prior to that, I spent 20 years in the corporate world. So I started my career, as I mentioned, with Gillette. And then for the next 15 years, I was with GE Capital in different parts of the business. Actually, the journey really started, hitting in end of 2014 and early 2015. I was going to turn 40. And I jokingly say there's something about midlife crisis. So I was like, okay, I'm here. What else do I want to do for the rest of my life? I think that was the question I asked myself. And, Krista, one thing I always tell people is that I loved my job till I left it, okay? So I was not one of those who was burnt out or who was disillusioned or who didn't love their job. I loved it. And there's something about leaving things at such a high, like leaving it when it was only going to get upward from there. So that is surprising to a lot of people. They were like, yeah, but why did you then leave it? And I was like, I want to kind of leave it when I know I have all this confidence, I have all this energy, I'm like really raring to go. But there was also this thing of, okay, I can continue to do what I'm doing, or do I want to do something completely different? So that was the question. And how I got to that question is because I had a coach. I worked with a coach in 2010, and she kind of really got me to think about things that I'm good at, things that excite me, things that I'm passionate about, things that drive me in a way that I hadn't thought of before. And it's not like immediately I took an action. I sat with all those things for about 2 years because she coached me in 2010, 11, and I took this decision only in 2014. So it wasn't anything immediate that happened. But so with that, and one of the things that when I worked with her was that I want to do something with people, because that was a big part of my career. Very early on in my career, I started leading teams. So people were an integral part of my 20 years in the corporate world. So I wanted to do something with people. And the process of coaching fascinated me. So that's how I started. And the last 10 years have been great, not without its ups and lows. I've had some really great highs, but also really great lows. To give you an example, firstly, when I started off in 2015, I started off by saying, okay, I'm suddenly tomorrow I'll have lots of clients and all of that. None of that happened, right? So first year was a lot of what I called an identity crisis, because prior to that, I had always attached myself to the title I held to the company that I worked with, right? So I was vice president with so and such company. Now that was gone, right? I'm on my own. When I walked in the same room that probably I walked in when I had that business card, but now I don't have the business card, I saw that people's reaction was a little different to me, right? Like I had to almost start from zero. So that was one. Secondly, the thing about, what you took for granted. So like my calendar used to be all packed. People were wanting to talk to me, my teams, my clients, all of that. Now, when I quit, there used to be days when my calendar was absolutely empty. There was no meeting, there was no conversation. I wasn't meeting anybody. And that really was very humbling. It was like, oh God, like now what happened? Nobody wants to talk to you, right? Like I remember my husband coming home and I used to be like, let's just talk or let's go out because I need to have an adult conversation. I haven't spoken to anybody in the whole day. The third thing that I jokingly talk about is, I went from telling my assistant to book me on the shortest connection of flights when I was traveling to now going on cheap.com and looking for the cheapest flights, right? So there was transition at every level, financial, mental, emotional, overall identity. And I think that was quite a roller coaster. I don't want to glorify more than it was. It was very humbling. It was very grounding, challenging, but they also say growth happens there. Then of course, after that, I had to pull myself out now that I had made the decision and things like that, right? My first book came out in 2018. That was 2019. 2018, I wrote it. 2019, it came out. It was called Leader's Block. And the premise was just as best of writers go through writer's block, best of leaders go through leader's block, because it's temporary and they come out of it, right? So 2019 was a great year for me because my book was out and I was getting a lot of assignments to speak and, come and run workshops, but a lot of speaking assignments. And my 2020 was, I had these 6 really great conferences where I was booked for internationally. Okay, so it looked really good, 2020. But then we all know what happened. COVID happened. Everything that was on my calendar got wiped out. Everything. And that was really a low time for me again. 2021, I had to pick up myself. I had to say, okay, what else can I do? I had reached out to my existing clients, started doing a lot of virtual stuff and things like that. Things looked up. And these are big ones, but after that, there've been a couple of other spoilers. But basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not been a smooth ride. It's not been a straight, linear, upward journey, so to say. It's not. I've made my share of mistakes. I've spent a lot of time on a product that never took off. I've had assignments with clients that didn't go very well. There've been times I've received feedback that was not great because I didn't read the audience correctly. So I think that's all been a part of my journey.
As you were talking, I was just wondering to myself, so what changed? I mean, first it was like you're the vice president and then you became an entrepreneur. And then in that year, from very busy, suddenly you just like, okay, you have a clear calendar. What proactive steps or what steps do you take or what realizations hit you to make you realize, okay, right now I can start doing this in order to start filling up my calendar again?
Correct. And Krista, firstly, like I was saying, it was a humbling experience. I had to realize that I had to unlearn everything. Okay. And I had to stop being an expert because now I was not an expert. So one of the things I did was I found out who are the people who are in my field in Singapore. Because also, let me just add this, that I was new to Singapore. I moved here in 2014. So it's not like I had a huge network in Singapore. I barely knew like 5 people in Singapore. Okay. So even my network or ecosystem was 0 here. So that was just an added layer.
So literally 0, like you came from a different place.
Exactly. Literally, yes. I just knew like 5 people. Out of that, 2 were my friends and 2 some cousins. That's it. Like I didn't know anybody else. Because even our office was very small here when I moved here in 2014. So what I did was I actually identified, okay, which are associations or which are some networks that I can join. Okay. So I remember because I started off with coaching. So I joined a coaching federation. They had a Singapore chapter. I joined that. So there I met people. I reached out, I attended those monthly things. I started reaching out to people there. When I met them there, then I said, okay, can I get a coffee? Okay, how did you start? What happened? So kind of just curious, right? I want to know how did people start on their journey because there were some really experienced people there. They gave me their time. Some did not respond, which is again very humbling because, it's like you've got to bite your tongue and say, yeah, not everybody is going to respond. And that's absolutely fine, right? But out of 5, at least, even if 3 respond, that's really good. So I started slowly meeting people in those monthly meetings of that coaching federation network. There's a similar network, Asia Professional Speakers here in Singapore. I attended the first program there and these were like, I think there were about 40, 50 people in that room and all of them like really accomplished speakers and this and that. And I remember feeling so like small, thinking, oh my God, like, I don't know any of this and they are so great in their areas. And I was lucky because I met some amazing people there who actually, when they spoke to me, they said, oh my God, like you bring so much of business experience. We don't have too many speakers who actually have lived the life that they talk about. And some conversations like that over a period of time gave me a lot of confidence that, look, while I don't know this field, but I have all this experience that people are now valuing or seeing. So that kind of then built a little bit of my confidence. I identified a mentor in one of those forums who till today, I mean, it's been now nine years that he's been my mentor. I continue to kind of, be mentored by him, or now actually we're more of friends. We exchange a lot of notes, but yeah, so I picked up 1 or 2 people. I reached out to them saying, will you be willing to mentor? And then one person continued to be my mentor. So that's where I started taking baby steps. I started enrolling into a lot of courses. I said, okay, maybe I'm going to invest my time. I did a lot of certifications. And main thing was one, learning, but also meeting people. So those kind of became my meeting grounds, for me to start building my network. So, I mean, I can go on, but I just wanted to kind of pause there.
So you really took the lessons you learned from your corporate world about visibility.
I did.
Applied them into entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. And that's why even when we write in the book or when I'm working with leaders now, when I keep telling them, I said, I'm not making these up. I have lived the upside and downside of not doing this, right? A lot of what I say or do is also my lived experience. So it's just not made up by me.
And you have both, right? Right now you have both. You have your corporate, and then now you have your entrepreneurship experience. So that's fantastic. So basically, you can really coach anyone from both sides.
I mean, I don't know if I can say that I can coach anybody, but yeah, I guess by now I have experience from both sides for sure. That I can dip into and kind of share my own stories around my life, the 20 years in the corporate world, and now my life as 10 years as an entrepreneur. Yeah.
And what are you doing right now? I know, okay, we know you have the book, right? 2 books, not even one, 2 books, right? You have 2 books.
What we are doing right now, actually last 4 years, our focus has been, creating a program for women leaders in Asia. And that is how the book also came about, is that we realized there are lots of books and lots of, frameworks and articles on women leaders, but they are all written with a Western lens. And we were missing the Asian nuance, and they miss the Asian nuance. So one of the things that we try to do with the book is that we want to bring in a lot of Asian nuance to anything that we talk about in the women leaders space. So what we do right now, we are focusing a lot on our program that's called Amplify. It's again a women leadership program focused on women leaders in Asia. So far, 100 women leaders have gone through the program. It's a 6-month program with 3 modules, combination of learning and group coaching. So that's kind of where we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of our minds into it. How can we even make it more robust? How can we sustain the learning that come out of it and things like that? We also launched an assessment. It's called Thrive Scorecard. It's basically a self-assessment on these parameters that are there in the book. So confidence, network, visibility, balance, and growth. So people can get a good report to say where they are on each of these parameters as of today and what actions can they take to move it to the next level. So that a lot of focus is there.
Is this program mainly for women in corporate?
That is correct, Krista. For now, our focus has been women leaders in corporate. Having said that, we are kind of experimenting with a small group in Singapore with some entrepreneurs. So things around confidence, things around visibility, network, we realize it's also very relevant to entrepreneurs. It's not only just for corporate leaders, right? So we haven't done a lot yet with women entrepreneurs, but we are trying to experiment with a small cohort right now.
I love it when you said that, there are so many programs out there coming from the Western world. But, in Asia, where there's so much of diversity, there's so much of knowledge and lived experiences.
Exactly.
We sometimes look to the West for a lot of knowledge and program.
Yeah.
And that's precisely my point with my podcast. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Yes.
Why I have my podcast is also because I believe that there's so much that Asian women can share. And we can have those experiences shared with everyone out there. Instead of just looking to one single perspective or looking through one single lens. And the Asian perspective is more pertinent today than ever. Which is the thing that when you're talking, it's like, oh yes, finally there's someone who understands that this region, I would say this region, I'm talking about Asia, this region is actually filled with opportunities.
Exactly, absolutely, and and that's what we need to leverage. We need to leverage. We need to kind of take pride in this and really kind of own it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, so that's great. It's good that finally someone is doing something with a very Asian lens, I would say, very Asian lens, and to help women. I mean, right now you're helping women in corporate, but of course you have one part for women entrepreneurs, right? You're starting that, right?
That's correct. I'll just add there, Krista, our Thrive scorecard, that can be taken by anybody. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in the corporate world, whether you're seasoned, whether you're just starting out, that is for everyone because it's a self-assessment, so it doesn't matter. The questions and the way the scorecard is designed, it's just basic questions on these pillars. So that I would say is open to everyone.
Okay, great. So anyone who's listening can go and take your Thrive assessment to see where they are on the 5 pillars. So we shan't give away too much, but one of the pillars is visibility, right?
That's correct. That is correct. That's correct.
Okay, so Ritu, now when we talk about visibility, there's also talk about executive presence. And I'm sure that is something that is also important, especially to women, right? I mean, to men, maybe they already have it. But for women, executive presence is something that women have to work at. It's something very important we have to work at. What are your thoughts on this?
For me, executive presence actually is one of those words that everybody uses it, but everybody has their own definition on it, right? You talk to different people and they have very different understanding of executive presence. The way I define executive presence, a very small part of executive presence is really your appearance, and then there's a certain element which is around communication. But a big part of executive presence is about how do you maintain your calm when you're taking difficult decisions or when you're under stress or under fire, right? So it's basically, if I were to sum it up, executive presence is a lot about maintaining your demeanor. It's your presence.
Keeping your cool, right?
Keeping your cool, exactly. And not when things are all great. When things are all great, everybody is doing good, right? It's when you are under stress, when things are not going your way, then how do you maintain that cool really defines your executive presence, right? Now, that's the broader thing. But of course, there are things that people can do. Just yesterday, I was on a radio and I was talking about this is, sometimes I've seen women being, of course, invited to conferences to be on the panel and you're sitting there. And I know it's men and women both, okay? But just that because we're talking about women, I'm just using them as an example, is that sometimes just the way you sit on those chairs, right? I've seen sometimes people like slouching or people like folding their hands, which to the audience shows that you're disinterested or maybe you're not confident, right? Sometimes little gestures like those can also exhibit executive presence, can kind of decrease your executive presence because you're coming across as somebody who's disinterested or you're coming across as somebody who's probably not confident, not listening to the other participants on that panel, or just kind of, focus, looking somewhere else when somebody is talking to you. Very small gestures, but they go a long way in making people form an opinion about you or first impression about you. Right. So I would say if you're looking to up your executive presence, start with even small gestures, things like, making sure you're being very open, your body language, your eye contact, active usage of hands, smiling a bit, right? Like all those things kind of add to your presence. And those are things we can all start to do. Then, of course, is the inner work about, how do you maintain your cool? Like, as you said, when there are tough decisions to be taken or when you are confronting somebody or when you're trying to resolve a conflict, all of those then are the bigger piece of work. But we could start with the small ones.
Yeah. And as you were talking about how women show up on stages, I think one of the things that as a participant of many conferences, I think the one thing that often maybe annoys a little bit is the fact that some panelists would be checking their mobile on stage. Even though they could be reviewing what they want to say, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that they're just looking at their phone kind of signals to the audience that maybe they're checking their WhatsApp messages. I don't know.
That's correct. And actually, that's such an interesting point. And that's a new thing. I've seen a lot of people do that. And it's maybe, like I said, maybe when you get old, all these things are new to you. So even I kind of sometimes think, are you listening to me or are you kind of looking at your notes or are you looking at your phone or something, right? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's also how we look at technology. Technology can help us, but probably signals something else to the audience.
That's
if
true.
you're always referring to your phone, right? Or looking at your phone. So you talked about inner work, which is actually very interesting. It's like, when we talk about inner work, is that what you also focus on in your coaching?
Yes. So in my one-on-one coaching and even in a program. So in the program, actually the coaching part of it does that. We talk about these, like I was saying, inner work. We kind of, have coaching conversation. It's not about any framework. It's about these small changes. Firstly, starts with awareness, and then about taking these small changes in our mindset and in our actions that kind of lead finally to the work that we want to do on ourselves. So it's a big part of our program. And also it's a big part of my executive coaching that I do with leaders.
So now I want to go into a little bit more personal stuff that you mentioned before, right? So you mentioned that you're a big fan of journaling. And you have been actively doing that for the past 8 years. So what's one reason that keeps you hooked on this practice?
So I'll tell you, when I started, it was one of those things. I had read about it. I heard people that, journaling is very powerful. It's a great way to start your morning, or it's a great way to write down your thoughts. And actually I started off like that, saying, okay, I'm going to experiment. Let me see. And I would write a lot. But what's kept me going after so many years has been every 2-3 years, when I'm like cleaning my cupboard or something, I look at my diary and sometimes I open pages and I'm surprised by things that I wrote 2-3 years back, because a lot of them also have come true. And I know it sounds a bit weird. Like, I was looking at my diaries, and in 2021, I have written that, I want to write a book, on women leaders, and this is what I want to do. I want to talk about this. This is 21, okay? I forgot about it. And in 2023, I actually wrote the book, right? I started thinking about it in 20. So like now in 24, when I had the book, I was looking at my journal in 2021. I was like, oh my God. Similarly, with my first book in 2016, I had written, and that time I had just started off that, I want to write a book someday and it'll be published by a well-known publisher, like all of those things. And then in 2019, my first book came out. And there are many instances like this. So what's kept me hooked to it now is this looking back and saying, like things that I write with pure intentions, like somehow they just end up coming true. So that's a very personal reason.
I am smiling as you say it, because I love journaling too. And although I don't journal every single day, sure, I think that journaling has a power when you just want to put your feelings or your emotions or thoughts down on paper. And like you, I've had those things happen to me too. Sometimes I write like a bucket list, right? Like a wish list of things that I wanted to do or accomplish. And then you write it and you forget it. And years later, you reread those paragraphs or reread those pages and suddenly, wow, you made those wishes come true without realizing it. It's a very powerful practice. And,
it is.
And that is something that I think more men and women should spend some time just writing down their thoughts.
And on a serious note, Krista, of course, like I said, it's a fun part that things have come true. But I think for me, the other reason is that it's just in the morning, it just helps me clear my head. Like any thought that I have, positive, negative, anything that I'm ruminating about, I put it down. And when I put it down, when I just write about it, it just empties my headspace. So I kind of, so for me, it's also a little bit of a, just venting or just putting everything out there so that now my mind is empty and I can go about my day. So that's the other reason why I've continued for so many years. And I think it's become a part of my morning routine. Now, of course, there's some days I don't write. It's not like every single day, because sometimes morning is rushed or if I'm traveling. But if I miss it for 2-3 days, I'll come back to it. But it's just part of my routine now.
Would you say that most people these days don't journal? Just curious.
Yeah, it's interesting that people don't journal, but what's also surprising to me is a lot of leaders I speak to, and they do journal, and which is very surprising to me, including men. To me, actually, I wouldn't have expected them to be journaling. And people who've actually taken on to journaling last 2-3 years have really found it powerful too. So it's, so I'm surprised on the other side that actually people are doing that.
So in your book, Rewrite the Rules, you've chronicled stories and interviews with so many women leaders. besides the journaling, what else surprises you about these women that you've written about or spoken to?
When we've spoken to about 200 women leaders, and not everyone's story is there, and actually not pure stories are there. We synthesized all of that and came up with these 5 key rules. But one thing that was common across, and actually in the book, towards the end, there's a chapter called Notes to Myself. And that was really surprising to us, because every single person we spoke to, when we asked them, what advice would you have for your younger self? All of them, in some shape or form, in some words or something, said, I would tell my younger self to be kind to herself. Or they said, I would tell my younger self, what's the rush? Like, what are you, why are you in such a hurry? Which in a way kind of is a big message for everybody who's listening out there, is that be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. And also there's no rush, right? You all have got many years of work in front of us. So you don't have to rush through everything.
No. I mean, that's quite surprising, because that's quite common across all the leaders. Wow.
Yes. They all said the advice they would give to younger self would be this.
Yeah. So now that we have talked about the book, is there anything from the book that I have not asked that you would like to say, or you like to let our listeners know about?
I would say 2 things. One is that we've kept the book very practical. So one is that, so you can pick the book up and you can take anything that you want to take from there with very specific practical steps. The other thing is, I know a lot of people these days don't have the patience to read, and that's fine. The book has 5 key rules, and you can read any rule that's of interest to you. They're not designed to be sequential. So for example, if you're somebody who wants to read only on balance, you can read the chapter on balance. If you want to read only on visibility, you can read the chapter on visibility, or on growth, anything. So that's the other thing, that you can read the book the way you want to. And the other thing I would say is that in the book, we've tried to keep the narrative very, we've given the control to the reader. So basically what that means is you take what you want to take from the book. And similarly, from all the advice and everything that's in the book, it's about take what you have and make of it what you want it to be. And that's why it's called Rewrite the Rules. You don't need to follow the rules. You don't need to break the rules. You just need to write your own rules, things that work for you and things that feel authentic to you. So that's the thing I would add about the book.
So it's like pick your own adventure.
Pick your own adventure. Yeah. And our tagline is own it. Whatever you do, just own it. That's it.
Okay. So for the woman who's listening and who feels unseen despite years of hard work, what's one powerful step she can take this week to start rewriting her own rules around visibility and leadership?
Yeah. I think first, just one thing I would ask that person to do is, what do they feel when they are not heard? Like, what does that word not being heard, not being seen mean to them? Like, if they can start to decode that and write, okay, when I'm in meetings, I'm not heard. When I go out, I'm not seen. Something, because if they can decode that emotion, then they can take actions around it. So first step would be, what does that mean into actual actions of not being seen, of not being heard? If they can start to write that. Once they write that, then they can take actions around each one of those.
So again, it comes back to write it down, journal
write
your
it
thoughts,
down.
Right?
That's why it's rewrite the rules. It's writing.
Yeah. So after that, they can take other actions once they are clear, right?
Yes.
What makes them feel, how it makes them feel if they are unheard, unseen.
That's correct. Yeah. What does that make them feel exactly?
Okay. And then after that, they can start doing something about it.
They can start taking action. For example, if they say, okay, I feel like this because every time I want to make a point in a meeting, I get disturbed. So for example, I'm just saying, or I get interrupted. Okay, now you know that particular thing. You've kind of found out the root cause. Now you can take an action. Okay, next time, if somebody interrupts you in a meeting, you are going to say, excuse me, please let me complete my point of view, right? Politely, but that's the action you're going to take. Because till we actually find out the root cause, we can't take an action. The second is, okay, what makes me feel unseen is when somebody is talking to me and they're not looking at me and they're looking at somebody else. Okay, what action can you take in that case? Okay, what action you can take is that when you are talking to that person, you can kind of make a direct eye contact with that person. So that when that person replies to you, they'll almost be forced to look at you, right? Because you are looking at them. Or maybe if you think that that's consistent, you can give that person a feedback after that meeting. Hey, I'll really appreciate it if next time, if you're addressing something to me, you kind of look at me instead of looking at my boss, right? But these action can be taken only when you know what specific things makes you feel the way you feel.
Fantastic. So thanks, Ritu, for those examples, as well as the key takeaway for them, like what makes them, first you find out the root cause and then you can take remedial action, right? Otherwise, there's no way you're going to figure out what makes you feel seen, right? Or visible. So we have such an amazing conversation. I could go on and on because there's so many tracks I could go into, but we did promise ourselves we're going to talk about visibility, and we also want to talk about your book, and I also want to get into your life. But you see, there's so much that we can get into, so probably I will need to get you back for another episode, for another season, to really get deep into your work. But before we leave, where can people connect with you if they really want to reach out and find out more about your work or program?
So firstly, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Ritu G Mehrish, on LinkedIn by my name. I'm quite active there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. We also have a website called letsrewritetherules.com. It's very simple, letsrewritetherules.com. There you can access our assessment, you can access our podcast, you can access also our micro-learning. So there's a lot on that website. And the third is we also have a YouTube channel called Rewrite the Rules, where you can pick some quick video learnings through all the women leaders that we've interviewed for the book and that we interview on the podcast. So those are the three key channels they can find us.
Yes, I forgot to add that Ritu is also a podcaster. So she's an old hand at this. So that's the beauty of interviewing podcasters, is they already know how to show up in podcasts.
Oh, thank you, Krista. I mean, I'm nowhere close to how well you run your show, and the amount of episodes you've done. I'm still taking baby steps, only on 35th episode versus your 100 plus. So.
But as we know, right, podcasting is a journey, right? So it's not about the number of episodes. It's just that we are doing something that fulfills us. And I think that is important as we move along in our entrepreneurship or corporate roles. So thank you so much, Ritu, for a very engaging conversation today. And I look forward to having you back again sometime soon.
Thank you, Krista. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I know sometimes I took your question and just went in circles, but I still hope your listeners will get something valuable out of it. So thank you.
How do you enjoy our conversation today, and what was your key takeaway? Mine was the profound insight into visibility as a spectrum and how important it is for women to be both seen and heard. I loved how she emphasized rewriting one's own rules and taking actionable steps towards leadership and personal growth. Ritu's dedication to empowering women leaders across Asia and sharing their stories through her book Rewrite the Rules truly resonates with me. Her focus on building intentional networks and maintaining an authentic presence highlights the significance of integrating personal values into professional life. If you are new to this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on the latest episodes. If you're a returning listener, please rate and review this podcast on your preferred podcast app. Your feedback greatly helps others find and enjoy our show. I look forward to connecting with you again with a brand new episode next Friday. Thank you so much and have a great week.